And then I will end with another one that carries on actually in a more present tone and a present tense of what this story of God's love means. When I look at this, I've pointed out in many different ways that John 3:16 and a handful of words here, the starting point is filial. For God so loved the world in sending his Son. The giving is unconditional. The reception is built on making it relational. The range is eternal, but the core is judicial. There is a law in operation, starting with the Father, it being filial, all the way to seeing the network and the matrix of a law at work all along. That he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. When I was a young lad, the story that made the most profound impact on me was a story based on imagination. You may have heard me tell this story in different forms, but it's been many, many years since I ever retold it. And it's the story of a young man from one village who was in love with a woman from another village. He wanted to marry her and have the permission of her parents, but she was tough and resistant towards his love. And finally, one day she said to him in a bizarre way, she said, I don't believe you really love me more than you love anyone else in this world. I will marry you if you prove your love to me. This is a typical Eastern hyperbole, hyper-Eastern exaggeration, but the Eastern imagination is quite rife out here. So he says to her, what do you want me to do to prove that I love you more than anyone else? She said, go back home, and I believe you really love your mother more than you love me. If you're willing to take the life of your mother for me, sacrifice her life, I will give you a yea in your proposal to marriage. So he goes home, ponders over this bizarre thing, and says to himself, how can she even be making such a demand of me? But in a frenzied moment of anguish and almost trying to prove his point, he takes the life of his mother, and the woman had laid one condition. You'll have to prove to me that you've taken her life. Bring her heart in your hand to prove to me that my heart is more important to you than hers. Takes the life of his mother, takes her heart in his hand, and he's running across the woods in order to get to this other village. While he is running, he stumbles over some stubble and all of that there and falls on his face, and the heart bounces out of his hand, and he can't find it. And he's rummaging through the dirt and the underbrush, and suddenly sees this heart, finds it, puts it in one hand, stands up, and he's dusting off the dirt of his knees and his chest and so on. And he hears a voice coming out of the heart saying, son, are you hurt? Son, are you hurt? Incredible imagination, typical Eastern form with melodrama. But a young lad hearing that story naturally is pondering, what is the point of this story? And it doesn't take long for you to figure out that a mother's love is so constant that no amount of injury given to her by any child will still diminish the love in that mother's heart for her children. Son, are you hurt? That to me encapsulates the magnificence in human terms of what the power of a story is, and points to the greatest story ever told, the story of the Father sending his Son and turning his face away from the agony through which he had put his Son, only to say of you and me, Father, forgive them, because they really don't know what they are doing. This story of love is the enormity of the greatest story ever told. Yes, you see hints of these kinds of things in many other Middle Eastern and Eastern stories, but this one is rooted in history from an eternal perspective of a law that is at work, which C.S. Lewis so wonderfully captured in the Narnia Chronicles. There's a law underlying all of this, but the sacrifice of Aslan, and to demonstrate the love that he had for the children there, and to point out that there's a heavenly Father who demonstrates this kind of love for you and for me. So in the few minutes that I have, I want to just bring to you some up-to-date realities with which we live and show you the supremacy of this love and why it is indeed the greatest story ever told. The terrifying thing at this time in human history is that on our own terms, by naturalists try to tell us that if you go back to the Big Bang and how long that this universe has existed in their own storytelling of naturalism, we are only about 0.0015% of the history of time occupying in this linear mode. We are sort of the last stretch of the cosmic mile. For billions of years, according to them, have elapsed, and we have just come on in this last moment and this last scene. So much preceded all of this, and yet here we are now. In contrast to the scriptures, we are the reason for the creation of this world. We are not here as an afterthought and as the last stretch of this cosmic mile. We are the reason this world was really created. Completely different in a paradigm and a story. And the terrifying thing is this, that even though they tell us we have existed for just such a small, minuscule percentage of time, if you look at what is happening in this world and the way we are destroying each other and all the pain we are inflicting on each other, we have lost the notion of ourselves even in this short period of time. Somehow we have desecrated and destroyed what it is that life is all about. Some time ago, a writer from England by the name of David Levy wrote an article which sort of hit the fan, and his article basically says this: people could now be falling in love and having sex with robots within a few decades, even marrying them, according to a British artificial intelligence researcher. In intimate relationships with artificial partners, he argues that current trends in robotics and artificial intelligence mean the leap to humans and robots forming relationships is not far away. Once robots become more like humans, David Levy believes romance between the two and even sex and marriage will be possible between a human being and a robot. He says also that though he is as an international master in chess, he believes that robots will soon appear so like humans in the way they look and act, in their personality and how they express emotions, that many people will fall in love with robots. His predictions are based on his analysis of certain trends on what he sees as the inevitability of how they will continue in the future. One trend looked at was how the objects of human affection have slowly expanded beyond other humans, firstly to animals, then to virtual pets, and even to robotic dogs. His thesis is this, that soon it will extend to robotic people as well. Virtual reality. You've got virtual dogs, you've got virtual this, virtual that. I would love to know when he writes his book whether he's willing to accept a virtual check or whether he would want a real one in its place. Just imagine, this is what has happened to us in the reality in this few moments of the cosmic smile, as they say. So not only is it terrifying, it is ironic that the more we understand the marvels of matter and our earthly home, the less we seem to understand the very purpose of life. The more this mystery supposedly is unraveled in the worldly terms and in material terms, the less we seem to have real value about who we are and the marvelous purpose of what life is all about. When Jill planned this conference, she's one of our prides and joys out here. She does a marvelous job in her love for the arts and her love for beauty. And she has a great love for storytelling as well. She's a prolific writer here, writing regularly, week after week, in our Just Thinking. So what I want to do is take one aspect of beauty. We normally talk on 4 themes: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. You take any one of those 4 themes: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. None of them can ultimately be fully explained without a sense of beauty within them. From the created order, finding meaning and purpose, and how David even realized how beautiful the law was and how precious it was that he drew his delight in the love of the law, that it was made for you and me for our benefit. And then as for our destiny, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. From origin, meaning, morality to destiny, beauty is implicit in all of those. We see the beauty of a child in our lifetime from the moment of conception, where then the mother begins to feel the movement of that little one in her body and the marvel of the mystery awaiting the arrival of that child, all the way till the day you then give them away in marriage and you see the beauty of a bride or the wonder of a groom receiving that bride. In fact, minutes after my talk is over, I have to head to the airport to officiate at a wedding in Kansas. Our longest serving employee in India, Shalini, her son is getting married tomorrow in Kansas, and I'm to be there for the rehearsal there tonight and then to help officiate at the wedding tomorrow. I can just imagine this little guy, born and cradled in Chennai, India, marrying this young gal from Kansas, thousands of miles apart, and tomorrow they come together to celebrate this wonderful picture of a man committing himself to a woman. One of the aspects of the ceremony that she wants me to make sure we do, in India they call it the thali ceremony. It is a necklace. The groom doesn't just give a ring, he also gives a necklace. It is him committing to her that this adornment that you wear around your neck is my commitment to you, that I will embrace you and hold you and treat you as that great treasure. Just like the priest of old wears that clerical collar saying he belongs to God, this necklace around the neck of that young gal given by the bridegroom is a commitment that they really belong to each other in the wonder of service. Love is a beautiful thing. From origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, the central theme of the Scriptures is really the love of God, very unique in the gospel. So I want to race through that, the supremacy of love. And the first thing I say to you, love is supreme in its reach. Love is supreme in its refinement. It's supreme in its reach, how we reach across miles, how we reach across time, how the memories of love extend across so many chasms and so many barriers. Billy Graham's brother-in-law is a man by the name of Leighton Ford. And one day we were sitting at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Leighton's a big, tall gentleman. He's married to Billy's wife, to Billy's sister, Jeannie. And Jeannie is Leighton Ford's wife. They've been married many, many years. In fact, Jeannie spoke at her brother's funeral when Billy's funeral was held recently. Jeannie's a lovely gal. But he was talking to me about his own life, Leighton, and what Billy meant to him, and how he became like an older brother, and how when he met Jeannie, his life took on new meaning. But he says, Ravi, the thing that I want to tell you that shaped my life most was the fact that I found out that I was really an adopted little boy, and I did not know who my mother was. And for decade after decade, he searched for who his mother really was. Finally, he tracked her down to St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Through all the methods that you have these days, he was able to find her. And he made that trip on a snowy day, landing in Toronto, getting into a car and driving to St. Catharines. He had contacted her and told her that he had found her. Would she be willing to meet him and see him? She was stunned. She said, I would love to see you, son. And so he got into the car and drove. It's about a 75-mile journey, but the snow took much longer. He said, I arrived in this neighborhood with the snow so drenching those streets and wondering what it was going to be like. He was in his 40s at this time. So he pulls up in the street and he's looking for the street number in that biting cold. He didn't have to look for the street number. He saw a woman standing under the tree, waiting, looking out for this car to come up the road. And as he paused and looked, sure enough, She looked also peered, waved him into the driveway. He said, I'll never forget the day I finally met her for the first time. I'd been given away as an infant child and was wanting so much to know a little more about my mom. So there they sat around the kitchen table. She was shocked to find out he was an evangelist, even more shocked to find out he was the brother-in-law of Billy Graham. And finally, when he was leaving her in the driveway, put his arms around her and he said, Mom, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can do for you? And the tears started to run down her face. She said, yes, you can. He said, what's that? She said, just love me. Just love me. The reach of love across 4.5 decades from a man who had become one of the most eloquent preachers of our time, in search of his roots and the womb that had brought him forth into this world. Love has an enormous reach. It can reach across time, reach across miles. It'll reach across the flames that might threaten you if a parent is trying to rescue the child. It'll reach out to lift a weighty car to rescue somebody, even who's not near and dear to you. We do those things because that's the supremacy of love in the enormity of its reach and the greatest gap that was ever crossed. God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Why do we love like this? Why? In fact, if you were to ask a Buddhist to explain this desire, nirvana, the monk will tell you, is to renounce this desire. Stop desiring. And that's what will give you your nirvanic hope. And even when you talk of moksha, release in the pantheistic worldviews, it's to be released from desire, released from any of these things. And yet Jesus tells us we are to desire, to hunger and thirst after righteousness. And the most righteous thing is the purity of love that is bound by the moral law that God gives to you and to me. The supremacy of love, the enormity of its reach, and in its refinement. I don't have time to expand all of this. But then you come to the selflessness of love. How love becomes so unselfish in the process. You know, the truth of the matter is when you hold the young maiden's hand and pledge, I do, I do, I do, you don't really realize how much you're going to have to do the rest of your lives. You just say it. You do and do and do and do. But whether we like to admit or not, there is a degree of selfishness in that. I desire to love this person. I desire to be embraced by this person. And then two adults walk life by life, stride by stride together. There is a degree of selfishness in this. But when a woman gives birth to a child, you see the beginning of total sacrifice, complete sacrifice. Even just this week, our daughter and her husband are in Europe. She has 4 of them. I don't know how she manages, frankly. The oldest is 6, and then there's a babe in arms. You know, every time a person with 4 children comes into the plane, I start praying. Because I'm very selfish. I say, is this going to be a longer journey than I had in mind? And yet you watch the mom. Amazing. There was one such flight, and this child was screaming most of the flight, probably really being bothered in the ears. It just seemed like a scream of pain. And everybody, of course, turning around, which the mother sure appreciates, I'm sure, to see that. And at one point, I got up from the aircraft, from where I was sitting, and I was walking to the back of the plane to the restroom, and I was walking right past the seat where this woman was with her child. And the child was leaning on her breast. And the woman had her head down, and the tears were running down her face. What do you do? How do you manage this? You can't get out of that aircraft. You're carrying that little one. Will that in any way diminish the love of this mother for the child? Absolutely not. It's one of the most selfless things that you can do. Love has its supremacy, but love also has its selflessness. You cease to live for yourself. That comes from the vertical direction, and then it goes in the horizontal direction.
You've been watching Let My People Think with Ravi Zacharias. We're grateful for your prayers and financial support. If you'd like to know more about this ministry or would like to donate to our efforts, you can call us at 1-800-448-6766 or visit us online at www.rzim.org. You can also stay connected to RZIM through Twitter and Facebook. Our mailing address is RZIM, Post Office Box 1820, Roswell, Georgia 30077.
RZIM Academy is RZIM's online learning platform, and the brilliant thing about it is that the Academy allows people to learn from our amazing team of global speakers in the parameters of their own lives and jobs and families and responsibilities. The focus of the Academy is very practical. It comes down to having one conversation at a time, learning to ask good questions, learning to really listen to the people around us as we have conversations in our own life. It brings together people from all around the world. Students have the opportunity to learn from fellow Christians from different countries and different backgrounds and different cultures as they all come together around the content in a learning community that really encourages good conversation. For more information and to register for the next course, go to rzimacademy.org.
People are interested in having a spiritual life, but treat faith more like an a la carte menu at a restaurant, choosing what they like and dismissing the rest. Cutting through the hype and seduction is the clear voice of author and apologist Ravi Zacharias in his book, Why Jesus? Rediscovering His Truth in an Age of Mass-Marketed Spirituality. Ravi answers the attraction known as the New Spirituality. Billy Graham calls Why Jesus a powerful defense of how Jesus Christ brings meaning and hope to an individual life. And Charles Swindoll says, I'm not acquainted with a brighter mind or a more relevant and devoted defender of the faith than Ravi Zacharias. Why Jesus is available in bookstores now or online at rzim.org.
The mission of Ravi Zacharias International Ministries is really to reach the thinker and the skeptic, to answer the questions, and do evangelism undergirded by apologetics, in clearing all of the obstacles that stand in the way so that the questioner can take a direct look at the cross of Jesus Christ. We put it simply, it is to help the thinker to believe and the believer to think. The fivefold thrust of RZIM has always been first and foremost evangelism. We do evangelism undergirded by apologetics. We are involved in training people where they are and within the church, and training our young to be able to answer the questions that are being asked of them, and then spiritual disciplines, because we never want to forget the heart that has to be touched and reached. So